All right, well, hello everyone. Thank you all for joining me today. We are going to be discussing the next generation of vitamins in topical skincare. My name is Michael Q. Pugliese. I am the owner and CEO of Circadia. Circadia is a professional skincare brand. We are based in rural Pennsylvania. This is a brand that was started by Dr. Pugliese back in 2001. And prior to founding this company, he had a very long and successful career as a consultant and an educator in the industry. And I've been fortunate enough over the last more than 15 years to be working with him in a number of areas of study of his expertise, including cosmetic chemistry, aesthetic science, physiology, anatomy, biochemistry. And I'm so happy to have so many of you joining me from all over the country, all over the world today to discuss this topic. Now, the use of vitamins in professional skincare is nothing new. We've been using different forms of vitamin A, C, E, and D in professional skincare, but we're going to talk a little bit more about the in-depth detail of these different vitamins and how they are actually utilized and the different forms that we can use, and maybe even some of the different forms and how they're used in the formulations. So we're going to go through that in detail. We're also going to highlight some of the different forms of those vitamins in the Circadia formulations. So please, if you have questions, go ahead and ask those. We have George and Caitlin standing by to be able to help to facilitate the answering of some of those questions. And we also have our very competent sales team that's there at they're all working from home, but they're there to help to answer questions as well. Okay, so without any further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started. First question we pose is, what makes something a vitamin? A vitamin is an absolutely essential nutrient, but it's not capable of being produced by the body. So we have to get it from some outside source. And really the primary source for most of the vitamins that we need come from diet. And clearly, as we know, most of the vitamins that we get from diet play essential roles in the body, but they also play critical roles in overall skin health. And we're going to talk about quite a few of them today, some in a little bit more detail. We're going to have a pretty good focus today on vitamin A, mainly because it's so widely used. It's one of the most effective tools against visible signs of aging. It's used pretty frequently in acne. It's had a little bit of a resurgence in the use of acne, and we're going to talk about specifically why and how it is utilized to treat acne. But its primary function in skincare is for treating the visible signs of aging. So we're going to talk about what it is, how it works, and how we as professional skincare providers can actually use vitamin A. What we're looking at here is the chemical structure of vitamin A, more specifically in its natural form, which is retinol. Now we'll talk about, again, the different types of vitamin A that we can use in professional skincare, but retinol is considered to be, again, the natural form of vitamin A. It is the alcohol form of vitamin A. And if you look to the right of your screen, you see the letters OH. That means it is the alcohol form. So retinol, when you hear OL, retinol, OL at the end of the word, we know that it is the alcohol form. Same with tocopherol, which is a form of vitamin E that we'll be discussing today. That is the alcohol form of vitamin E. So we can utilize that particular form in a skincare product, but we can also utilize it to create variations of that particular ingredient. And when we talk about esters specifically, we'll talk about how retinol is used to create other esters of vitamin A, which is a very interesting, very fascinating topic. The chemistry of vitamin A is also very interesting because, again, it doesn't occur naturally in plants. Right? We don't get natural sources of vitamin A from our plants. We do find it a lot in animal products, meat products in particular, liver. I was doing a little bit of brushing up on some research in this, and there's quite a bit of vitamin A content found in different forms of liver. In fact, there's so much vitamin A in certain animal livers, if they're consumed, they're actually quite toxic. But again, no forms of vitamin A can be found in plants. What we do find are the precursors of vitamin A, and the one that you're looking at here on the screen is beta-carotene. So for every molecule of beta-carotene that's eaten, that will actually be broken down and metabolized to 2 molecules of retinol. So carrots specifically, very high in beta-carotene, things like pumpkins, squash, we see a lot of beta-carotene in those as well. When we look at overall function and use of vitamin A by the body, vision is a big one. Without the use of vitamin A, we see a lot of night blindness, cellular gene differentiation, transcription, and morphogenesis. And what that means is that vitamin A is used a lot in the maturing of cells. They help cells to divide and differentiate more effectively. A lot of the deficiencies of vitamin A are linked to immune deficiencies because vitamin A is responsible for helping to transition immune cells. So we're going to take a look at a chart here, but all the immune cells, basophiles, eosinophiles, leukocytes, vitamin A is absolutely critical in helping to differentiate those from bone marrow stem cells. And we'll take a little bit of a deeper look at that. They're all involved in immune response, skeletal growth, and also male and female fertility. What you're looking at here is a chart that shows how vitamin A is utilized in helping to differentiate stem cells into mature cells. And it all begins at the top here with what's called hematopoietic bone marrow stem cells. And those bone marrow stem cells will then differentiate into things like lymphoid, myeloid, erythroid cells, and then they become more specific categorized cells. Again, the immune cells that I mentioned, things like neutrophils, basophiles, mast cells, things like that. And vitamin A is absolutely critical. So again, when you see vitamin A deficiencies, a lot of them are linked to immune disorders. So lack of vitamin A oftentimes links to not only night blindness or night vision issues, but also immune deficiencies. When we talk about vitamin A and the skin and how we utilize it, one of its main functions and main purposes is in cell differentiation. We talk a lot about how vitamin A is effective as a skin plumper. And sometimes you'll hear those that are either naysayers or talk about the overuse of vitamin A, how it's actually thinning the skin, which in effect it is capable of doing, but it doesn't necessarily thin the skin. What it does is it creates, and I'm getting ahead of myself just a little bit, it creates an excessive level of proliferation. Vitamin A is essentially helping to differentiate and proliferate cells in the epidermis, but really what it's doing is helping to thicken specific parts of the epidermis, in particular the granular cells, but it really helps to compact the stratum corneum. A compacted, well-aligned stratum corneum is a sign of young, viable, healthy skin. When we look at very young skin, individuals that are between 10 and 20 years old, they have a very well compacted, very flexible stratum corneum. It reflects light very well and it gives a very young, youthful, healthy appearance. It also helps to increase collagen and elastin production, and it can actually help to inhibit collagenases, which are the enzymes that are there destroying, continuously breaking down collagen. So it's, again, a very, very powerful tool. It's been around for a very long time. In different variations. Retinoic acid, which we'll talk about, is the form that all vitamin A has to eventually metabolize. And of course, retinoic acid is the prescription form of vitamin A that you see on the marketplace. But the different cosmetic grades like retinol and the esters that we'll discuss are very effective and also very capable of doing essentially the same thing. It can help to protect against ultraviolet damage. We've got to be careful with how we actually say this because it's also recognized as a photosensitizer. So most of the time, you will almost always exclusively see vitamin A recommended at night. And one of the reasons, because it helps with cell differentiation, it accelerates that process. And when a cell is differentiating, it's replicating itself, it's dividing. And in order for that to happen, the cell has to completely unwind, right? So when you're looking at a DNA structure, when it's replicating, that DNA structure is completely unwinding, and when that's happening, it's very susceptible to damage, in particular ultraviolet radiation. It's one of the reasons why you see significantly more, in fact 30 times more epidermal proliferation and cell turnover at night. That's something that's part of our circadian rhythm. It's one of the premises and the concepts at Circadia is that you see a significant amount more repair and cell division in the evening. And the body's conditioned to do that because if that's something that's taking place during the day, again, that DNA is much more susceptible to ultraviolet radiation and the damage and cross-linking of DNA structures that occurs specifically from UVB damage. However, in certain circumstances, when it's linked, coupled with other ingredients, in particular palmitic acid, it has been shown to help protect against ultraviolet radiation. There's some significant debate that's gone on over the years on that particular topic. But it is in the literature. Any questions I hope I made that clear. Again, so a lot of information that's there, and there's, like I said, quite a bit of research that's been published on that topic. But has any questions come in on that?
We do have a quick question, Michael, and I'm sure you're going to get to this when you talk about the different forms of vitamin A. But since you did mention retinol palmitate with the palmitic acid attached to the retinol, have you heard that this can potentially be pore clogging?
Yeah, absolutely, it can be, and here's why. And that's a pretty loaded question. Let me answer it the best I possibly can. The reason why palmitic acid can potentially be pore clogging is because it accounts for nearly a quarter of the oil solubles of the epidermis. So when you have a high level of palmitic acid on the surface of the skin, it is a very, very long chain fatty acid, but it's a naturally found acid. It's a component of the skin normally. But when you're putting a large, significant amounts, it can be potentially comedogenic. Now, everything, again, it's dose dependent, right? It's all about the concentration and how much is there. Usually, if it's linked to retinol, which again, it's retinol palmitate, which is the ester. You've got retinol and palmitic acid together. You're going to see a lot more irritation just from the level of vitamin A, not necessarily the comedogenic from the palmitic acid. If you're seeing breakouts from the use of retinol palmitate, it's probably because of the proliferative effect of the vitamin A and the desquamation that you see inside the follicle, not necessarily what's happening from the percentage of palmitic acid. So it's an observation that's been made, but really what's happening is you're creating more proliferative effect inside the follicle, which is creating more congestion. And again, we are getting a little ahead of ourselves when we talk about the function of vitamin A and how it's used in acne. One of the things that you'll notice oftentimes when using vitamin A is it has a tendency to get worse before it gets better. In fact, that's one of the first observations that Dr. Kligman and specifically Dr. Fulton made, that whole team, is that when they were using retinoic acid for acne treatment way back in the late 60s, early 70s, is that the breakouts were occurring because it was having this proliferative effect. It was causing more clogging and more cell proliferation inside the follicle. So they had to stop and start that study several times because the subjects kept coming back and saying, this is making my acne worse. But ultimately, they also found that it was making some of the wrinkles go away, and that's how the application for retinoic acid and Renova and MA and all that came about. But again, it's a pretty expanded story, but I don't think it's necessarily the palmitic acid that's the culprit here as much as it is the effect of the vitamin A. But you can use vitamin A to treat acne. It's just kind of an uphill battle sometimes. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think that makes perfect sense. Thank you.
A little bit of a loaded answer, but it's a pretty it's an in-depth question. Okay, let's talk again a little bit about how the A itself works. So vitamin A is actually classified as even though it's a vitamin, it's a lipid-soluble hormone that aids in cell transcription. In order for it to function, the cell receptor has to be inside the cell. So those of you that were on the webinar where we discussed peptides, because the peptides are so large, the receptor is on the outside. So the receptor gets on the outside and then sends the messages to the DNA inside the cell, whereas the vitamin A, it's a lipid-soluble hormone. So it is capable of moving directly through the membrane of the cell, and it binds with a receptor on the inside. Now the diagram that helps to show this. So retinol, again, is moving in. At some point here, it actually converts to retinoic acid and it binds with what's called the RARC, which is the retinoic acid receptor. And it becomes the retinoic acid receptor complex, and from there it will bind to the nucleus and it will create the action on whichever cell that we're talking about. So if we're talking about epidermal basal cells, it's going to create that proliferative effect. It's going to basically help to really push that cell transcription and cell differentiation. If we're talking about fibroblast cells, it's going to help to create those proteins. It's going to function to help to create collagen, elastin, and some of the others. But again, when we talk about vitamin A in skincare, we're really exclusively putting it in these categories, but vitamin A is utilized in many, many cells throughout the body, specifically for differentiation in stem cells. Now, as far as forms of vitamin A goes, there's a lot. There's many options, and there seemingly is more and more options all the time. Retinol, of course, is kind of the gold standard. It is the alcohol form. Retinoic acid, I think, as I mentioned, this is the prescription strength, and all forms eventually have to become retinoic acid. But retinol is very active. Even at a low percentage, it penetrates the skin very quickly, penetrates into the cell, and as I showed you, binds with that receptor and goes to the nucleus very quickly. The issue with retinol, of course, is that number one, it's relatively unstable, so it oxidizes pretty quickly. It's also the one that's associated with a fair amount of irritation, even at a relatively low concentration. So the industry started working on how do we stabilize this particular vitamin, how do we make it a little bit more user-friendly, right? How do we keep it stable inside the package, and how do we make it so it's less irritating? So they started creating esters. Now, an ester, as I mentioned, is a combination of alcohol and an organic acid. So we have a list here. We have retinol acetate, retinol palmitate, which we discussed briefly already, retinol propionate, which is a newer one. This is something that Dr. Fulton helped to pioneer not that long ago. Again, when we look at the esters, you have a percentage of the ester that is the alcohol and a percentage of the ester that is the acid. So in the case of retinol acetate, and I'll make this quick because this can sometimes be a relatively long explanation, right? You look at retinol acetate. Retinol acetate is about 89% retinol, but 11% of it is acetic acid. So comparably or comparably, it is very close in strength to retinol. So if you're working with a product that's, say, about 1% retinol, which is pretty high, if you want to get something pretty close to that 1%, you could use a retinol acetate. So, for example, we have our vitamin A boosting cream. That's a 1% vitamin A, but we're using higher than 1% retinol acetate to be able to come up with a comparable percentage. In contrast, retinol palmitate. Retinol palmitate is considered to be a little bit more of a gentle form. The reason being is that retinol palmitate is only 48% retinol, but it's 52% palmitic acid. So it's not quite as active, and it has everything to do with the fact that it's far less percentage of retinol. So it's a little bit easier to work with because palmitic acid, again, is a larger fatty chain acid. It penetrates into the skin a little bit deeper. Incidentally, the body stores vitamin A as retinol palmitate, not for very long, but it does. Retinol propionate is, again, as I mentioned, a form that's relatively new. It's retinol and propionic acid. I don't have the exact percentage breakdown of that, but it's somewhere in between retinol acetate and retinol propionate. And those are probably the three most widely used in the industry currently. Retinaldehyde is another form. It is good. It's great to use. Unfortunately, it's not highly available when it comes to cosmetic availability, so it does have a higher cost that's attached to it. The issue, of course, is that it has a tendency to oxidize a little bit faster than the esters, and it will leave a little bit of this orangey color, is what I found. We started working with it early on when it was only available in what's called reagent form. So the cost was huge, and it was not widely available. But I do find it to be an effective form, but you also have no real data on how much is an effective level. There isn't a whole lot of literature that's published on how much it should be used. But while it is a relatively good form of a product to use, there's not a lot of research on it as of right now. Retinoic acid, as I mentioned, is the prescription strength. All of the forms that we just mentioned will ultimately convert into retinoic acid. Retinoid is an interesting one. I actually just got some information on this not that long ago. I think this has finally been pulled off the market. For those of you that have taken some of my classes before, you may have heard me mention this. What this was is a combination of retinol, the alcohol, and retinoic acid. So they created an ester. There's a company that was supplying this, and a raw material supply. They created an ester from retinol, the alcohol, and retinoic acid, which was the prescription strength. And they were doing this for quite some time. But I tried to get my hands on it to work with it, and I thought, how is this even possible that they're marketing a prescription strength? And I was never able to, I got some of it, we put some in a product, but I was never able to get any more of it, and now the company that was making it is nowhere to be found. So I think the regulatory bodies at B eventually pulled that from the market, but it was a very interesting concept. But again, these are the ones that you're gonna see most prominent in the market. The point is that if you get it in at a good concentration and you can get a client that tolerates vitamin A well, you will get good results no matter what you're using here. If it is stable, if it's formulated well in a good product, you're going to get relatively good results. And it's one of the fastest working ingredients that we have in the professional skincare industry. There's a little bit on esters. It's a great diagram. Again, what I talked about when you have an alcohol, which would be the ethanol, and the ethylenic acid, which is the acid coming together to form an ester. Now, as I mentioned, there's two primary clinical uses when it comes to utilizing vitamin A. We have acne and aging skin. The major one, of course, is in aging. It does not take very long to see some of the visible signs of aging, whether it's pigmentation, wrinkling, expression lines, sagging skin, start to be reversed when it comes to the use of even a very modest concentration of vitamin A. When we look at the nature of acne, we'll talk about specifically why vitamin A can be effective, but it does take a little bit of getting the skin to become acclimated and a little bit of getting used to using vitamin A for acne specifically, especially if you have an existing inflammatory case of acne, anything between a grade 3 up to a grade 4, it can actually make it significantly worse before it starts to get better. Kayla, any questions before we move into this?
Nope, I think we're good to move forward.
Okay, what we're looking at here are two illustrations on the top and then also two histological punch biopsies on the bottom. When we look at a young versus a mature skin, you can see a lot of very distinct measurable differences in the skin. And of course, the big one is the integrity of the dermal proteins. Collagen, elastin, fibronectin, laminin 5. These are all things that we can measure the quality of. And if you look at the mature skin, all these darker spaces that you see, that's a combination of things like ultraviolet radiation, pollution, glycated skin. This is a breakdown of the integrity of those dermal proteins. Versus the young skin, of course, you see a very well-structured dermal tissue. You also notice these peaks and valleys. You can see more so on the illustrations on the top here. These peaks and valleys, the dermal papillae and the ready pegs, what these do, first of all, it's a classic sign of epidermal proliferation. So this means that the basal cells are dividing and the cells are turning over relatively rapidly. You're looking at a difference of someone who is probably 18, 20 years old versus someone on the right here that's about 65 years old. So this again is a sign of very healthy young skin. Those cells are turning over probably about once every 15 days versus the individual on the right. This is skin that's turning over probably once every 40 to 45 days. When you look at the skin on the left, again, you can see not just the dermal papillae and the ready pegs, but you can actually count the individual granular cells. And again, that's a sign that you've got, even though the dermis gives a structural integrity, you have this nice, cushy, buoyant layer of granular cells. The stratum corneum, again, is nice and well compacted. It's flexible. You can actually see it, the individual layers versus the slide on the right here. The stratum corneum is much thicker, and it's a little bit more rigid, and it's not as flexible. It doesn't look as youthful. But the great thing about the skin on the right versus the skin on the left is even with a relatively modest amount of vitamin A, a modest percentage, we can get the skin that's on the right starting to look and behave a little bit like the skin on the left, right? Just with that simple proliferative effect, and also the fact that we've got the fibroblasts capable of starting to produce those dermal proteins, we can get skin starting to look a little bit better and functioning a little bit better. Now, what we have here are three separate histological punch biopsies. The one on the top left here, this is actually untreated versus the top right, which has been treated with a 0.1% retinol, which is relatively low, versus a 0.5, which is a 0.5%, which is significant. So the untreated area, again, what you see is, again, a relatively flat basal layer. You can't really count the granular layer cells. You see a not very flexible stratum corneum. And even with a 0.1%, what we're starting to see is the restoration of those peaks and valleys. We're already starting to see a little bit of collagen and elastin production, and we can start to count those granular cells. We look down here on the bottom, and at that 0.5% of vitamin A, we can see these dermal papillae really start to become reestablished. we can now count each individual granular layer, and we look at the stratum corneum here, and it's very compacted. In fact, there's not a whole lot of stratum corneum here. We could probably make the argument at this point that this 0.5% retinol may be a little bit too much for this client. If we look at this client, we may see quite a bit of redness and flaking and some peeling, which is actually something that's relatively common with clients that start using high percentages of vitamin A without acclimating. One of the most important things to do when we start using vitamin A is start with a relatively low concentration and then build up. And we'll talk a little bit about that when we start discussing the products and how you can get the skin to acclimate to vitamin A. Start small and then build up. That's the general rule. This is a great slide. It's a thing of beauty to behold for skincare professionals. You're looking at a slide on the left, which is no vitamin A use versus the slide on the right. And again, this is a relatively short period of time. I don't know exactly how long it was, but you can't see any of the alignment here of the epidermal cells. On the right, you can see each individual cell all the way up to the top, and some incredible, nice compaction here on the stratum corneum. So just a really, really telling example of what a small amount of vitamin A can do in a short period of time. And again, this is the use of Renova, which is the prescription strength vitamin A. And you can see a dramatic reduction in the amount of visible signs of aging, the wrinkling just around the eye. Now, this is a before and after that was done many, many years ago, way back in 1990. And I keep this in here because the advancements that have been done with the use of vitamin A are tremendous. One of the interesting things about retinoic acid specifically is that you don't find it in particularly great formulas when it's written as a prescription from a dermatologist. The advantage that we have in professional skincare industry that we as estheticians have is that we utilize products that are blended and made and formulated with other active ingredients, things like peptides, things like stem cell technology, other vitamins together. And you don't traditionally see that in pharmaceutical grade or prescriptions like retinoic acid. So you leave a lot on the table by just using a prescription strength of vitamin A. But still, even the use of something as simple as this gives us great results.
Michael, while we're on the topic of prescription retinoic acid, there's been a lot of talk about retinoic acid specifically having the potential of thinning the skin over time. Can you address a little bit the difference between why a prescription retinoic acid versus a retinol acetate or another form of retinol would have more of a potential of thinning the skin over a long period of time?
Sure. So, I mean, when we talk about thinning the skin, again, what's really happening is that we're seeing less stratum corneum at the surface of the skin. And what we should be seeing really, and you do see this with even the use of retinoic acid, is really a thickening of that granular layer. So it is kind of plumping the epidermis all together, but you do want to see that compacted stratum corneum. But what happens is there's too much proliferation, right? And if you're using high levels of retinoic acid, prescriptive vitamin A for a very long period of time, what you can end up developing is almost what's called a parakeratotic state for the skin. Parakeratosis means it's essentially immature cells at the surface of the skin. You don't have any corneified cells at the surface of the skin. If you look at the lips are considered to be a parakeratotic tissue. There's no keratin there at the surface, and that's something that you can see pretty frequently with the overuse of vitamin A, specifically retinoic acid. So there's less of a danger there oftentimes with the cosmetic grades. And certainly, if you have brands that are relatively antiquated and have not changed much since introducing retinoic acid, if they're still using, cosmetic ingredients that we know can be good for the skin, but also potentially treat inflammation, things like ascorbic acid, we'll talk about that here briefly, in conjunction with things like hydroquinone, glycolic acid, all things that were cutting edge at the time, but now that we know, when used in combination, in particular at high percentages, are also creating inflammation in the skin. So it's really the combination of those things together that create the big problems. But overuse of vitamin A, specifically retinoic acid, is causing a thinning of the skin at the surface, but more specifically that parakeratotic state. So immature cells at the surface of the skin, essentially sending a boy to do a man's job. And what it does is it makes the rest of the cells underneath the skin, underneath the surface, much more susceptible to environmental damage, ultraviolet radiation, pollution, you name it.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Was that good?
Yes.
Sure? Okay. Okay, let's talk a little bit about acne treatment, because I know we want to keep moving with our time, and we have about an hour to cover everything, but we'll probably go just a little bit longer today, if that's all right. Okay, treatment of acne. So really, when we look at acne, there's four traditionally major factors. Androgens are the big one. You know, we see both boys and girls at puberty, overactive sebaceous glands, stimulating more sebaceous material, pushing that inside the follicle. That sebum is then recognized by the P. acne bacteria as an additional food source. The P. acne bacteria begin to proliferate and grow even further, and they break that sebum down into fatty acids and glycerol. And it's the fatty acids that begin to then irritate the inner lining of the follicle, and all that pressure that continues to build up ultimately begins to create these ruptures. But it's the basal layer that goes all the way down underneath the hair bulb. And I think we have an illustration. When we look at the basal layer, we talked a lot about how the cells divide and move to the surface, and that's one of the functions that vitamin A helps to accelerate. But because this basal layer goes all the way down underneath the hair bulb, these cells desquamate inside the follicle. Now you add a proliferator like vitamin A to this, and it accelerates the proliferation, that desquamation inside the follicle. When you're adding the when you're adding the sebum into this equation, it's pushing these cells to the surface faster. And because the opening of the follicle is on an angle, right, it's called the nibulum, which means funnel. It creates this perfect area for cellular debris and accumulation. So once this walls over, it becomes a plug. So all the cells continue to desquamate inside the follicle. The sebum continues to pump inside the follicle. The P. acne bacteria are dividing because they're consuming that sebum as a food source, and all of that pressure builds up and creates this rupture underneath the surface of the skin. Again, that fatty acids that the sebum gets broken down to by the P. acne, that's what creates the irritation. So when you look at those larger inflammatory lesions, they're very deep underneath the surface of the skin. So again, the vitamin A, the issue is it accelerates, at least initially, it accelerates the desquamation inside the follicle. So again, you'll oftentimes see someone who uses vitamin A with an existing acne condition, it gets worse before it gets better. Right? They'll report and they'll come back to you and say, my acne is getting worse, or I'm having more breakouts. Or someone who's not used vitamin A before, even if they don't have acne, if they start using it at a little bit of too high of a percentage, they'll start to purge. It'll create more blemishes. And it has everything to do with the fact that those cells are desquamating inside the follicle. Now, after about 4 weeks, and again, this is an observation that was made way back when Dr. Fulton was conducting these studies at Penn University. After about 4 weeks, those desquamation cycles start to normalize, and you see a reduction in the amount of acne lesions. But it takes about a month. Now, Dr. Fulton also helped to pioneer what's now known as the Fulton method, and that was the use of vitamin A along with salicylic acid, mandelic acid, benzoyl peroxide. It's a good method. It can be relatively harsh on certain skin types, but it does get a relatively good rate of clearance. Now, if you follow that, it can be very good. Right? It's very good for a lot of clientele, but you have to have a lot of dedication. You have to have a client that you know is going to follow that thoroughly and be very, very consistent. If they're not, it can end up being a big problem, because again, they're going to start to see more blemishes before they start to see any kind of effective rate of clearance. So that's the double-edged sword of using vitamin A for acne treatment. It can be good, but you really need diligent and consistency with those clients that you're working with. This is the use of vitamin A for treatment of cystic acne. And like I said, you can get some fantastic results as long as they are consistent. For aging, I want to talk a little bit about some of the offerings that we have. So some of you are familiar with the products that we offer here at Circadia, some are not. This is the Nighttime Repair Plus. So this is our mid-level of vitamin A. And you can see I have it highlighted here. This is a 0.5% retinol acetate. This is the Nighttime Repair Plus. We also have our Circadia Nighttime Repair, which is a 0.3%. So in general, when we have our clients or our clients, the guests coming in, the end user, we almost always recommend that they start with the regular nighttime repair at the 0.3%. They use that for about 8 weeks. They can get through that single product, and then we would bump them up to the 0.5%. And we bump them up to the full nighttime repair plus at a 0.5% retinol acetate. As I mentioned, the benefit of using the cosmetic grades like retinol acetate and some of the other esters is it allows us to blend it with things like other vitamins, stem cells, peptides, and that's exactly what we've done here with this product. We have the matrixyl synth-6, which is also a collagen stimulator, specifically collagen types 1, 3, and 4. It's ergothioneine, which is an ancillary antioxidant to vitamin C. So we have something called tetrahexadecylascorbate, which I'll discuss when we get to the vitamin C portion. That's an oil-soluble form of vitamin C. And also tocopherol acetate, which is a form of vitamin A, which we'll discuss. So you've got a really complete, very comprehensive night cream here in the Nighttime Repair Plus. So as I mentioned, just to kind of reiterate this, you start with the regular nighttime repair at 0.3%, get that client through that product, which usually takes about 8 weeks at the 2 ounces, and then bump them up to the regular nighttime repair plus, which is a 0.5%. Caitlin, did that all come out the way it is supposed to?
Yes, it did. So we have a couple of questions though, just for clarification, about the usage of vitamin A for acne. Would you recommend, like if you were going to be writing out a protocol for somebody, would you recommend they start slow and work up, or what would your protocol look like?
Right. So, I mean, for those of you that are familiar with Circadia, familiar with the brand, you know that we make all of our own products in-house, that we have research and development. It's in the DNA of what makes Circadia Circadia. So I've worked with it personally. I've used it. I've had clients that used it. We have made more products in our labs than we have ever put out with a Circadia label on it. So I find it's easier to work with other vitamin A alternatives. We've looked at the possibility of creating protocols using vitamin A for the treatment of acne. I'm not a huge fan of it, but there's more evidence to suggest if we have other things with it that we may be able to use it. I would not recommend the products that we have currently for long-term use for treatment of acne, the vitamin A products that is. Right? That's not to say that we don't have clients that have, yes, that they've put it on and that they've had success with it. It's just not the main function for this, because again, what you're looking at are things like matrixyl synth-6, some of the others. These are anti-aging ingredients. So this is truly an anti-aging formula that's going to give you a pretty significant reduction in visible signs of aging. It's not really an acne-focused product. But I'm not saying that we don't have the ability to help to clear some acne with some of our existing vitamin A products. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. So like the vitamin A boosting cream, which we'll get to, and the vitamin A gel could be options to add into your regimen of daytime control, nighttime control, but starting them slowly and then gradually increasing the amount of days you're putting it on is ideal for our protocol.
It is, and we do have some very experienced, knowledgeable estheticians who have taken the vitamin A gel, for example, which is a full 1% retinol, and have worked that into some home care recommendations and have had some great success treating acne, because it is a 1% retinol, the alcohol form, and that formula is an ethanol formula, right? So it's a very high concentration, and it's something that penetrates the skin very, very quickly. So it's a heavy duty product, but it's a very useful tool and weapon for treating not just aging, but those estheticians that know how to use it have also utilized it to treat acne. Okay. All right, we'll move on to the vitamin A boosting cream, which is something that Caitlin just mentioned. So this is a full 1% retinol acetate. So those of you that have used this is typically what we recommend as an add-on, hence that's the term boosting cream. So if you're using the nighttime repair plus, let's say you got through the regular nighttime repair, now it's time to bump up to the nighttime repair plus. You've had that client using that product probably for at least a good 4, maybe 6 weeks. You like the results that you're seeing, they like what they're seeing, no redness, no flaking, no blemishing. You can then start to take the vitamin A boosting cream and spot treat certain areas. Maybe say you're working on some deep lines and wrinkles around the mouth, maybe on the forehead, nasolabial folds, maybe you're working on the neck and décolleté for some deeper hyperpigmented lesions. The vitamin A boosting cream is designed to go right over the top of the Nighttime Repair Plus, right? Too many of our clients will stop using the regular Nighttime Repair Plus and then switch directly over to the boosting cream. Don't do that, because if you stop using the Nighttime Repair Plus, you're leaving on the table all the benefits of that product, because again, it's a very complete night cream, right? The Nighttime Repair Plus is designed to be used every evening, face, neck, and décolleté. But the boosting cream is specifically a spot treatment for targeted areas, right? Because it's a full 1%. So if you're using the Nighttime Repair Plus, you've got 0.5% that you're using in all those areas. But if you're using the vitamin A boosting cream, you're targeting right over the top. Now you've got two products together, and one of the beauties of using vitamin A is that when you layer the product, you're accumulating percentage. So by using the two together, now you've got 1.5% vitamin A, which is significant. Okay, and then of course the vitamin A gel, which is something that we just mentioned. It is a 1% retinol. It's a very effective product. It's heavy duty, so it's something that should be used with a thorough understanding and recommended with a thorough understanding from the professional, but it gets great results. As I mentioned, it's an ethanol-based product. It's an alcohol-based product, so the application of this is a little bit different. This typically goes right on under cleansing, and almost always this is going to be used a couple times a week. I've yet to see somebody use this for more than a couple, 2-3 days in a row without getting some level of flaking or peeling from it. It's just that aggressive. It's very strong. It's a true 1% retinol product. Very comparable as far as the formulation to our vitamin A accelerator. So again, for those of you that are familiar with the brand, the vitamin A accelerator is a 2.5% retinol. This is used almost always with our Mandeli Clear Peel as a system. So the Mandeli Clear Peel is a half Jesner with mandelic acid. This is an option that you have to layer on top of it, so you're getting a little bit more activity. It's far less active. The Mandeli Clear Peel is far less active than the traditional Jesner, but by applying additional layers of the vitamin A accelerator, you're getting in that additional proliferative effect. So you're getting what you would traditionally get from a chemical peel, which breaks down proteins at the surface, but the vitamin A again is pushing from the bottom up. So you're essentially getting the best of both worlds. You're removing what's at the top, and you're pushing from the bottom up. All right, Keelan, any other questions on the vitamin A piece before we move on to vitamin C?
I think we're okay to move on to vitamin C. Just one quick clarification. So as Michael was talking about, the Nighttime Repair and the Nighttime Repair Plus, that's your well-rounded anti-aging product. The boosting cream and the gel are designed to be just that, boosters, and used as add-ons in our step-up program. So you don't want to lose those added benefits that Michael just talked about of the Nighttime Repair and Nighttime Repair Plus and go straight to the boosting cream. More is not always better. And we always are big proponents of saying start slow. If you go too quickly, too fast, it's like taking one step forward and 2 steps back. So really starting them first on the Nighttime Repair or the Nighttime Repair Plus, and then gradually increasing to 2 to 3 times a week, adding in the boosting cream or the gel.
Yes, exactly. I mean, we are definitely big proponents of starting slow and then ultimately building up. Your results are always going to get better, and less chance of a client coming back and saying, I'm having some type of reaction to this product. Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to vitamin C. So one of the great things about vitamin C is that the consumer seems to have a very good understanding about the importance of vitamin C, not just for the body, but also for the skin. So it's less of a tough sell and less of an explanation for us as skincare professionals as to why clients should be using vitamin C. But I still find that estheticians don't always understand what vitamin C truly does for the skin. It's incredibly versatile and something that should be built into every skincare regimen. So we're going to talk again about what it is, how it works, and the different forms that are available. So vitamin C in general is recognized as a water-soluble reducing agent, meaning that it is an antioxidant and it's capable of donating a portion of its structure to unstable molecules. And it really is the quintessential antioxidant, the one that's recognized the most, and it really is unique in a category of antioxidants. It's also absolutely critical to collagen formation. We must have vitamin C in order for collagen to safely be formed and transition from what's called tropical collagen or pre-collagen into mature collagen by the fibroblast cells. It's also a very significant and very powerful tyrosinase inhibitor in certain forms. Some work a little bit better than others, but it definitely helps to work to lighten and brighten skin when used properly. Ascorbic acid, or more specifically L-ascorbic acid, is the form that's recognized by the body. So just with vitamin A and retinoic acid, there is a form, L-ascorbic acid, that all the other forms that we talk about, the cosmetic grades, have to ultimately be converted to. Real quickly, before we talk about the different forms, I love this little diagram because it really helps to show, gives it a good visual as to how important antioxidants, specifically vitamin C, are and what they do. So when you have a healthy atom, a healthy molecule, it will have two electrons, and electrons in nature have pairs. If an electron doesn't have a pair, it's going to go looking for one, and that's a free radical. The definition of a free radical is a molecule that is capable of independent existence, but does not have, that has one or more unpaired electrons. So the antioxidant comes along and it donates a portion of its structure to stabilize those free radicals. Now, particularly susceptible to free radical damage is the lipid bilayers of epidermal keratinocytes. And that's one of the reasons why we fortify our cosmetic products with so many different forms of antioxidants. When you look at, and I always think this is a really telling example, when you look at a piece of metal, this tractor that we have that's here sitting in the middle of the field, this is oxidation that's happening just from the amount of oxygen that's in the atmosphere, right? So what's happening is the oxygen, which is, again, the quintessential free radical. Oxygen is considered to be a free radical because it has not only one, but two unpaired electrons. It's literally breaking down this metal. It's oxidizing and causing the metal to rust. So you can look at the body as potentially rusting. We oftentimes talk about the body, and you will hear this explained sometimes as oxidation inside the body is internal. The body is internal rusting. So if you're taking in too much oxygen, it's actually creating a significant amount of damage. But we have antioxidants that we take to help to mitigate and reduce that potential risk. The different forms of vitamin C, we'll talk about those. So I mentioned again ascorbic acid. L-ascorbic acid is the form that you oftentimes see. And I have to say L-ascorbic acid, even though for those of us that are formulators and they use the product, it is a bit redundant. L-ascorbic acid is the form that's recognized by the body. You'll hear that oftentimes discussed and talked about in different marketing platforms. But when you hear L and D, when discussed in certain ingredients, what they're talking about is chirality, or the concept of chirally correct skincare products. But it's very hard to find what would be considered a chirally incorrect product. So there really isn't any D forms of ascorbic acid that are available for cosmetics, so there is a bit of redundancy to that. When we talk about ascorbic acid as a cosmetic ingredient and using it in professional skincare products, it is great if it's stable. One of the issues that we have with it is it is notoriously unstable. It has a tendency to oxidize very quickly. And when that happens, it gets dark in color, right? It'll go from relatively clear to a very light gold tinge to dark. It gets dark gold, sometimes very yellow. It can actually turn brown. And if it's very oxidized, it actually becomes completely black. And in that case, it's no longer an antioxidant. It's no longer working as something that's helping to neutralize free radicals. It becomes something called dehydroascorbate. It actually is capable of creating oxidative damage. So that's an issue. If you're using a product that's already oxidized, it can actually create damage to the skin. The other issue with ascorbic acid is that if it is stable, you're going to see that at a pH of anywhere from 3.5 to 4, which is pretty acidic. So if it's applied to skin that's already compromised, whether it's acne, rosacea, psoriasis, any kind of contact dermatitis, the skin conditions that would benefit the most from a stable form of vitamin C, it's actually going to sting quite a bit. So some of you may have actually experienced this yourself. As long as it's in a material that allows it to be stabilized, sometimes you'll see it now in a silicone base. If it's in water, it oxidizes pretty quickly. But as long as it's stabilized, it works well. But of course, the issue of it being irritating at a low percentage for compromised skin, there's unfortunately no real way of getting around that. In order to get around the issues that I just mentioned, the supply side of the industry started creating esters just like they did with vitamin A. So you have these forms. Ascorbyl palmitate is one. That's relatively antiquated. We don't really see that much anymore. This is an oil-soluble version of vitamin C. Magnesium ascorbyl phosphate is probably the most widely used water-soluble form aside from ascorbic acid. And this is the one that we use in our professional product. This is what we use in our vitamin C reversal serum. It's my favorite to work with. It's extremely active. It's very stable when it's formulated correctly. And you can think of magnesium ascorbyl phosphate as ascorbic acid, and you see ascorbyl right there in the middle, right? Ascorbyl. You can think of this as ascorbic acid with magnesium and phosphate hooked to either end. And this is a really very clever, not only stabilizing system for the product, it stays very stable inside the product, but it's a very clever and unique delivery system. Magnesium and phosphate account for about 2% of the water solubles of the stratum corneum. And when this is applied to the surface of the skin, the magnesium and the phosphate are metabolized off and used for other biosynthetic reactions in the skin. And the ascorbic acid is left to very nicely and very easily penetrating the skin and do all the things that vitamin C is supposed to do. So again, it's neutralizing free radicals. It's helping to inhibit pigmentation as the tyrosinase inhibitor, and it's working to stimulate collagen. So it's a very, very smart next generation type of vitamin C. Sodium ascorbyl phosphate is another one. It's not quite as active as magnesium ascorbyl phosphate, but it certainly is a great option. Ascorbyl glucoside is another. This is also oil soluble and is considered to be a more gentle form. You see this in a lot of eye products. We use it in our full circle eye repair. Aminopropyl ascorbyl phosphate is another very interesting one. It falls along the same lines as the magnesium ascorbyl phosphate and the sodium ascorbyl phosphate. Again, not quite as active as these two, but the benefit that we have from this one is it has a very broad pH compatibility. So this one you can take all the way down to a pH of around 3, but it also goes all the way up to a pH of about 8. And one thing I forgot to mention, that magnesium ascorbyl phosphate, as great of an ingredient is, it is relatively finicky when it comes to the pH. It has to be slightly alkali, and that's one of the reasons why it works so well as a topical ingredient. When this is applied to the surface of the skin, the reason why the magnesium and the phosphate come off and we're left with the ascorbic acid that's there in the middle is because this is a slightly alkali pH. When this is applied to the slightly acidic pH of the surface of the skin, that's what ends up pulling these other two molecules off. And that's what makes this such a smart functional ingredient. As I mentioned, the sodium ascorbyl phosphate, it does the same thing, but it's not as active of a percentage of ascorbic acid. Tetrahexadecyl ascorbate, this is kind of the hero of oil-soluble vitamin C's. I think I mentioned that ascorbyl palmitate is a bit antiquated. Most of the industry has moved away from the ascorbyl palmitate and gravitated towards this tetrahexadecyl ascorbate. You may see this in the literature as what's called BVOSC. That's the trade name for this one, but if you see it on the product, on the back of the label, this is how you'll see it appear. And ascorbyl lactoside, this is another one, but it's not very widely used in the industry. The point of having all these listed for you is to see just how many that there are out there. Some are better performing than others. They all have their place in the industry, but there are a lot of different options. As long as it's stable, as long as you've got a good delivery and a well-formulated product, the vitamin C will work to do all the things that vitamin C is supposed to do. It's just a matter of getting it into a stabilized product. Ascorbic acid, as I mentioned, as long as you're solubilizing it prior to application, that's probably the best application that I've seen. But most of these other forms that we talked about are relatively easily converted to ascorbic acid. I'll skip over a couple of these because we are running a little short on time today. So much information to cover, folks. Caitlin, any questions on anything we covered there?
We did have one question, and I wasn't quite sure if you were going to cover this in your section on vitamin E, but just the relationship of vitamin C to vitamin E.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, remind me about that when we get to vitamin E, because I want to give a little bit of the backstory on E as a lipid-soluble vitamin, because I think that's important to give them a little bit of background before we jump into that.
Okay, perfect.
But just remind me if I don't cover it.
Okay.
Okay, so again, just a little bit of info on our vitamin C product. This is our vitamin C reversal serum, even though we use many different forms of vitamin C in several different products throughout the Circadia brand. We're using a 10% magnesium ascorbyl phosphate. This is also in a multiple weight hyaluronic acid base with some panthenol, which is one of the B vitamins, which hopefully we'll get a chance to. And this is our best-selling product. We sell more of the vitamin C reversal serum than we do any other product throughout the Circadia range, because it's good for everybody. Everybody can and should be using a good, stable vitamin C, because we're confronted with free radicals from a number of different sources through the environment. The body is producing them as well, and it's just a very, very important product to start on as soon as you possibly can. And like I said, it's very versatile and multifaceted when it comes to the performance. I have a video here that I'm going to share with you. And this is interesting because it's a representation of just how effective this vitamin C is. Now, what I've done here is I put some iodine into a solution, and the iodine represents free radicals. Even though the iodine is not a free radical, the iodine represents free radical stress, and the water represents the skin. When you put vitamin C into the solution, what you'll see is it clears it very quickly. So if you think of the iodine as free radicals, the vitamin C is donating a portion of its structure to stabilize that vitamin C or the iodine, and it's creating a clearing. When you add iodine back into that solution, it represents the staying power of how it helps to neutralize those free radicals. It's not even solubilizing any further. It's actually causing it to continue to stay clear. So not only does the vitamin C neutralize free radicals on contact, but it continues to neutralize free radicals throughout the day. So it's a very, very powerful form of vitamin C, and it's a very powerful visual that we have here. You can do this in your clinic. You can actually show your clients, you can show your guests this as well. It's simple iodine, comes from the pharmacy. You can put it in a solution, just do a little mixing. You don't have to have a stir bar like we have here, but you can put this in and you can actually test, even if it's not a Circadia vitamin C, you can test to see how stable your vitamin C is. If you put a couple drops in and put a few drops of your vitamin C product in, it should clear it relatively quickly. If it doesn't, chances are the vitamin C is not at a high percentage, or it may be completely oxidized. So just a little something for you to try at home. Now, I think I mentioned already that the nighttime repair does have the tetrahexadecyl ascorbate, which is the oil-soluble form of vitamin C. And we do have some ascorbic acid in the zymase, which is the citrus enzyme. So this is a professional treatment product now that we're talking about. Those of you who have used this product know that our zymase enzyme is the most active. It's the most aggressive of the three. One of the reasons is, again, it does have a little bit of vitamin C in it. It's not a huge percentage, but our topical enzyme is the most conservative. The raspberry enzyme is a little bit more active. The zymase or the citrus is the most active of the three. And all three of them contain bromelain, papain, and trypsin enzymes, but the citrus is the most active, and in part it's because you feel that little bit of tingle that you get from the ascorbic acid. Now, I know we are now at the point where it's 10:30. We had about an hour. I'm going to go a little bit longer to be able to cover the vitamin E and the vitamin D that we were hoping to get to. So hope most of you can stay with us. If not, we have the webinar that's recorded, and we'll be able to send this out a little bit later on. But hopefully you can stay on. Here's how: if you have any additional questions, you can call the 1-800 number, 1-800-630-4710, or you can simply email us into info@circadia.com. You can take a look at our website if you're interested in perusing full ingredient disclosure. We have a lot of protocols on there, a lot of educational resources, and of course, our Facebook forum, which is the Circadia Educational Forum, is a fantastic resource from all of our professional accounts. It's our professional community, all across estheticians from all across the country, all across the world, sharing their information, knowledge, and experience. It's a really great place to get familiar with the brand if you are not already. Okay, Keelan, any questions before I move on to the E section?
Nope, I think we're ready to move on.
Okay, so again, same thing with vitamin E. This is a lipid-soluble vitamin, and we want to talk a little bit about the relationship between vitamin E and vitamin C because it is so important. Interestingly enough about vitamin E, it's tocopherol, so it is an alcohol form, but vitamin E was discovered as a fertility vitamin. In fact, the name tocopherol comes from childbirth and to carry, tokos and furin. Those two words together come from childbirth, the words childbirth and to carry. So that's the origin of the name. But what's really interesting about vitamin E is that it actually resides in the membrane of most cells. That's where it's functional. So whereas vitamin C works in the watery environment outside the cell, it can actually be carried into the cell, the watery environment inside the cell through what are called aquaporin channels. And of course, vitamin A, as we discussed, moves into the membrane of the cell and binds with the retinoic acid receptor complex. Vitamin E in the different forms resides within the membrane. It's actually the first line of defense of free radical attack as the free radicals approach the cell. The challenge with vitamin E, unfortunately, is that it only has a single portion of its structure to donate. And this is the point that, I'm getting to that Keelan mentioned, is that there's a very synergistic relationship between vitamin C and vitamin E. When vitamin E does stabilize a free radical, when it does donate a portion of its structure, it reverts to a compound called a quinone. And quinones are relatively dangerous molecules, especially when they're embedded in the membrane of the cell. What vitamin C does is it comes along and it recharges vitamin E. Right? Let me repeat that. Vitamin E will donate a portion of its structure to stabilize an unstable molecule. It stabilizes that free radical, but it reverts to a quinone. So vitamin C comes along and then recharges vitamin E. Now, there's a series of other things that happen so that vitamin C can be recharged. But again, there's a very important relationship between vitamin C and vitamin E. Vitamin C is capable of recharging vitamin E. Now, vitamin C does not need vitamin E the way that vitamin E needs vitamin C. They're not mutually exclusive of one another. But almost always when you see a vitamin E product, you will have vitamin C somewhere in the protocol. Right? So if you've not heard that before, you can do a little research, or maybe you have heard that before, and this is a little bit better or a deeper explanation of exactly why.
Michael, real quick, so can you just clarify, if you are using a vitamin E product, you don't have to have vitamin C formulated within the same product. It can be utilized within the protocol for that application, or does it have to be in the same formulation?
Right, right. So you got it right the first time. So it doesn't necessarily have to be in the same product. You will usually find it somewhere in the protocol as far as layering products. So for example, there's a lot of ingredients that are out there that just naturally have vitamin E, wheat germ oil, or palm oil, or rice bran oil. These are things that are used as emollients in a lot of different products that you won't see vitamin C in. Or you'll just use a vitamin C serum like ours, and then you'll see those emollients in a separate product. So as long as it's somewhere in the application process, when you're applying it to the skin, they do work effectively together. So you won't always see them in the same product together. Is that clear?
Yeah, yes, that's clear. And just so everyone notes too, if you look at a lot of our nighttime repair products, more importantly, our corrective lotions, they all contain a certain form of vitamin C, depending on the formulation, what form we're using. And then also, if you're reading the back of our vitamin C reversal serum directions, you'll notice it does say both AM and PM application. Ideally, it's an AM application. We got that question that came through. However, you can use it both AM and PM for this exact reason, and also for other just regenerative purposes.
Okay, so one of the most important functions of vitamin E specifically is in barrier protection and barrier repair. We see, again, a lot of the emollients that I mentioned, they're designed to help to keep the barrier in good condition, in good repair, and vitamin E is essential to that. So whether it's used as the primary emollient in a product, vitamin E is going to help to maintain that overall protection, whether it's the emollient purposes or for antioxidant purposes. You see it used as both. The individual types of vitamin A, you have essentially vitamin E, tocopherols and tocotrienols. Tocopherols are the alcohol forms. We talked a little bit about that, and we'll discuss the esters. Tocotrienols, I've been talking about these for a while. I first heard about them when my grandfather published a paper on vitamin E's. This is several years ago, probably 2008, 2009. And what's interesting about them is they only come from natural sources. So as a someone who sources raw materials, who does manufacturing, all of our manufacturing in-house, we can buy the tocopherols from a number of different suppliers. And we can buy the ester forms, just like vitamin C and vitamin A, whether it's retinol acetate, retinol palmitate with vitamin A, or ascorbyl palmitate with vitamin C. Tocopherols also have esters. So you have tocopherol acetate, tocopherol nicotinate, tocopherol linoleate. They come from a number of different suppliers. But the tocotrienols only come from natural sources like rice bran oil, like palm oil, like wheat germ oil. Those are the ones that I mentioned. And you can actually look these up and you can find different charts that will show you percentages of which of those materials contain different types of tocopherols. You have alpha, beta, gamma tocopherols, and alpha, beta, gamma tocotrienols. So as you're doing research, I'm sure most of you that are watching the webinar today, you're making notes and you say, oh, I got to go back and I want to check this out. I want to learn a little bit more about this. And that's what webinars like this are designed to do. They give you some broad stroke information, and then you've got to go back and do some additional research. So I'm sure a lot of you have heard of tocotrienols before. Those of you that haven't, you go back and do a little bit more digging. But you're not going to find a commercial source of tocotrienols specifically. You're going to see them in the natural sources like the ones that I just mentioned, and you'll see them in the finished product. You'll see tocopherol on an ingredient listing on the back of a product, but you won't see that with tocotrienols. You'll see palm oil listed or rice bran oil. This is just a little bit of a summary of what I just went over as far as the different types, alpha, beta, gamma, delta. Those are the different forms that you're going to find. This is a breakdown of some of the different percentages and milligram concentrations per 100 grams of the vitamin E's in these different sources. Again, the different sources of tocotrienols, palm oil, rice bran oil, wheat germ oil, barley oil, oat. These are some of the big ones. And you see these as cosmetic ingredients quite a bit. I talked a little bit about vitamin E as far as maintenance for barrier function. It also is effective for protection from UV light, but not in anything that we can actually measure or put an SPF claim on. It's not something that we can do for. It's also been used for treating scarring, and there is some legitimacy to it. It's not just vitamin E is an old wives' tale for treating scarring. It can actually help to break down aberrant scarring or old scar tissue, help to repair damaged scar tissue. It does take a long time, and the efficacy is somewhat minimal, but it does work. So this is a little bit more detail on barrier function, but this is relatively standard info. Okay, let's cover a little bit more on the product section, and then I want to cover vitamin D, and then we'll wrap up because we are getting a little bit long for today. The Vitamin Veil, this is a great product, and again, one of the reasons why I wanted to highlight this is because it contains such a high level of different forms of vitamin E. Cranberry oil in particular, I wanted to highlight this because this has all the different forms of tocotrienols and all the different forms of the tocopherols. It's unique in that regard. There's nothing else out there that has all of them together. Nothing else that I've found so far. It's a brilliant product, really user-friendly. It's an oil-based cleanser. And for those of you that have used oil-based cleansers before, a lot of them, the oil cleansing method that's online right now has really popularized that concept. But this is a beautiful, beautiful product. The base is soybean oil. Really helps to remove mineral makeup. The foaming cleansers, the surfactants don't do a fantastic job of this. So you need something that's really going to help to solubilize those minerals. And this does a great job. But it really fortifies the skin with this protective layer of antioxidants. And that's where the name vitamin veil actually comes from. So it leaves this kind of little bit of a thin layer behind. Doubles as a nice massage medium, and it's very, very user-friendly. The other interesting thing about some of these natural sources is they also contain enzyme modulating peptides, in particular soybean oil. So these can actually help to reduce visible signs of pigmentation, everything from reducing pigmentation to also helping to slow hair growth cycle. So very, very versatile natural resources that are found in this particular one. We already highlighted the nighttime repair, but I also wanted to add that we do have the tocopherol vitamin E ester, which is the tocopherol acetate. Same with the moisture on demand. For those of you that have used this product before, this is a fantastic moisturizer, but it is more of an emulsion technology. It is a serum, and we have two serums that we use for helping to assist with hydration. The Hydrolox, which is an oil-based product, but then also the moisture on demand, which has a little bit more of a thinner texture. Some of the really interesting ingredient technologies that we use here, there's Pentavitin and Expert Moist. Some of these are considered to be what are called climate-controlled moisturizers. They help to sense relative humidity outside the body. So if you're in, say, Florida, where it can be oftentimes subtropic humidity versus Arizona, where it can be single-digit humidity, it'll help the skin to recognize that level. If you have a higher level of humidity, water's always going to travel from a higher to a lower concentration. So it helps to appropriately gauge that relative humidity outside the body and adjust for a transepidermal water loss. So really interesting stuff, but the addition of the tocopherol acetate really helps to enforce and enhance the antioxidant protection. The nighttime control, it's very important to have soothing, hydrating, calming ingredients in, especially when you're using something like benzoyl peroxide. The benzoyl peroxide that we're using here is not a standard BPO. It is an encapsulated micronized form of benzoyl peroxide. So you don't have to use it as long and you don't have to use it as frequently. But that said, it's still a benzoyl peroxide. So we're adding calming, soothing agents, and with the addition of the tocopherol, it really helps to protect against the oxidative damage that can come from benzoyl peroxide. So very effective product against treatment of acne. As a bug killer, it helps to control the P. acne bacteria. Also very calming, very soothing. Same with the Spot Stop. Spot Stop is fantastic for helping to reduce larger inflammatory lesions, but with the addition of the vitamin E, it really helps to control antioxidant protection. And of course, the Tidal Moisture for Body, this too has the tocopherol acetate. Very nice moisturizer. In fact, this is one of the specials, a part of the special that we're running right now for Mother's Day, which I'm going to get a chance hopefully to highlight here for you in just a moment. And this has the tocopherol acetate. This is one of the vitamin E esters. Now, I'll cover vitamin D real quickly because, to be perfectly honest, vitamin D in skincare products is a huge challenge. It's not easy to get vitamin D into the skin topically. In fact, it's almost impossible. There are very, very little absorption rate of calciferol vitamin D into the skin. In fact, the sun, when the sun helps to create vitamin D in the skin, it's a systemic conversion. It actually goes through quite a process. So when you put calciferol vitamin D onto the skin, it really doesn't go very far. This is a commercial peptide. It's called pronocyclin, and interestingly enough, it's marketed as a circadian rhythm peptide. Better than Circadia to market a circadian rhythm peptide. This has become very common in the industry from the ingredient supply side. Many ingredient suppliers that supply the entire industry have started to create their technology based on circadian rhythm function. So very exciting, very gratifying for us. But what's so interesting about this one is this helps to activate vitamin D expression and biotransformation with less sun exposure. Right, so this can actually help increase cutaneous immune defenses by increasing vitamin D expression with less sun exposure. So absolutely fascinating technology, very effective technology for helping to increase immune defenses overall, because there's only a few ways to get vitamin D into the body, and it's through ultraviolet exposure, dietary intake, and through supplements. And that's the facts. So by increasing the skin's own ability to produce it, you're really, really helping to increase these immune defenses. So important. It's absolutely critical. So you'll have this, and this is a really nice summary on exactly how this works. The chronocyclin is an ingredient we use in a few of our products. Most notably, it's in the Revitacite, which is a very premium evening corrective moisturizer. We have some really high performance products and ingredients in this particular formulation. The Matrixyl Synth 6, which is something that we use quite a bit, but things like EUK 134, which is an incredible antioxidant. It's actually recognized as a biomimetic form of superoxide dismutase, which is it's the super antioxidant. It's how this company markets this particular technology, and it's been recognized to neutralize this particular free radical, which is produced by the body. We talk about that a lot when we discuss bioenergetics of the skin. It's also an active that we use in our partnership product with Hydrofacial as part of the chronopeptide skin energizing booster. And that's in there with another ingredient called Neodermal, which is recognized as an elastin stimulator, and two of the newer versions of the Matrixyl family peptides, which is Matrixyl Morphomics and Matrixyl Synth 6. So again, a really great powerhouse collection of anti-aging ingredients, but also skin health ingredients. It's also in the Recharge, which is part of the home care system that we have for our partnership with Hydrofacial. Vitamin D, probably one of the more important things when it comes to treating psoriasis. Very effective at helping with treatment of psoriasis. And here you have some histological punch biopsies of psoriasis, and you can see just how thick that stratum corneum is. And one of the issues that we have is that the enzymes associated with proliferation with psoriasis is just not there. But with vitamin D activation, those are one of the things. Some of the enzymes are able to be activated, and that proliferative sloughing process becomes a little bit more effective. Okay, I don't think we have the time to cover too much on niacinamide or methylnicotinate today. It is one of the B vitamins, niacinamide in particular. There's a version of it called methylnicotinate that we use in the professional firming and shaping gel. I'll just cover this for a moment, only because a lot of people have asked questions about this. One of the specials that we're running for Mother's Day are two of our body products along with the Well Bath Soak. So this is a combo product together, the Blue Bamboo and the Tidal Moisture for Body, along with the Well Bath Soak product. People have asked about purchasing the professional firming and shaping gel to go along with this. So this is the wholesale price. We are drop shipping this directly to the clients. The suggested retail is $80, but people have asked, well, what about the firming and shaping gel? This is something obviously that needs to be discussed with the client because it includes a version of niacinamide, which is something called methylnicotinate. So if you've ever taken niacin creates vasodilation, it creates flushing. Well, this particular ingredient creates localized flushing. Wherever you put in the body, skin gets very warm and very red for a good 30 to 45 minutes. So the client needs to become aware of this, but it's an incredible tool for helping to firm the area in particular that's affected by cellulite, the buttocks and the thighs. When women in particular develop cellulite because it's a condition of estrogen. As soon as women start menstruating, they start developing cellulite because the collagenases are breaking down that connective tissue all throughout the body. And the subcutaneous fat that's underneath starts putting pressure on that area, and that's what creates the uneven, bumpy look that you see when you have a condition of cellulite. So the firming and shaping gel has a number of ingredients that help to mobilize fatty tissue, but also metabolize it at the same time. It's also helping to rebuild and restructure the area that's been compromised and that is actually causing that uneven look to the surface of the skin. But the methyl nicotinate actually helps to warm the skin and causes this vasodilation. So it's an experiential product, but people need to know that this is something that's going to happen before they actually make the purchase. But I've been asked to talk a little bit about it today, but it's a fantastic addition to the current special that we're offering. So something that you could talk to your clients about if they're interested in it, but absolutely a fan favorite. If you're not familiar with it, you can certainly talk to the client care specialist at the home office. We are still offering our Rosacea Awareness Month specials, which is buy the Chronocalm and the Tranquility Cream and get the Aloe and Calendula Calming Mist for free. And these are all specials that are available for drop shipping, and we have our hand sanitizer back in stock. I wanted to talk a little bit about this because this is, we've got a lot of questions on this formula. It is the 75% isopropyl alcohol, which is the World Health Organization approved formula from the FDA. So we've been making this for the last few weeks. We sold out of what we got relatively quickly. We were able to get some more raw materials in. So we do have this available for stock. It's $10 for the 8-ounce bottle. We are selling it in 9 packs and 24 packs, but we will sell it individually. But because it is a high percentage of alcohol, there are some shipping fees that are attached to that. So if you have some additional questions, we can certainly field those from our sales team. Very happy and very honored to be able to provide this because it is something that we need. As we all know, the COVID-19 crisis is not going anywhere. I think there's going to be a heightened level of awareness about it going forward. And it's a great product. It comes in a spray. I've been using this nonstop everywhere I go, and it really comes in handy. It's something that you can keep in the car. It's something that you can keep in the backpack. And anytime you need it, it's there. You can spray, and it comes out a nice high shear spray. And it's something very, very effective, very efficient to have available.
Michael, we have a quick question on the hand sanitizer. So, and it's more regarding pricing.
Sure.
We do have the price set at $10. Can you just clarify if this isn't necessarily wholesale pricing versus our standard wholesale retail program?
Right. So the reason why we started making the hand sanitizer was because we were fulfilling a need. It's not wholesale. It's not retail. It's a $10 price to be able to fill the need. In fact, we understand that people may want to mark it up. They may need to mark it up. There is a shipping attached. It's one of the reasons why we're trying to push people to purchase the 24 packs because the shipping associated with that is only $15. So it helps to reduce the overall investment. But we've made it available to anybody who needs it. And we're not just selling this. Obviously, Circadia is a professional skincare brand. We are and we will always be a professional skincare brand, but we've made the hand sanitizer available to anybody who needs it. So there really isn't, nor there should be, a massive upcharge when it comes to this. The raw materials and the packaging are incredibly scarce. I mean, I do this every day. We source raw materials and packaging every day, even prior to COVID. So it's very hard to get your hands on materials, and especially packaging right now. So we just wanted to make this available for anybody who needs it, and we want to make it available right now in particular for our clients who are looking to open up in the next few weeks. I mean, we're heading into May, and we know a lot of states and a lot of governors are looking at opening up for business. So we know that the spas are looking at that, and this is a really, really valuable product to have handy. And, I want to address something that I've seen, and I'm not trying to downplay the contributions that a lot of companies have made, but, we're an FDA-registered ISO manufacturing facility. So we make OTCs every day. We weren't making concrete or silly putty last month. And I know a lot of manufacturers that are out there have had the opportunity to make hand sanitizer. There's a lot of care that goes in with making OTC products, and that's exactly what ethanol-based products are and isopropyl-based products are. So we're going to continue to make it. We're going to continue to make it available, but it doesn't have the standard markup pricing that our cosmetic formulations do. And I have to say, it's a formula that the WHO has approved. So people have asked, well, why didn't you put in a fragrance, or why aren't you adding oils to it? You can't. We're not allowed to. Anything that you add to this could potentially cut down on the efficacy of the alcohol. And the reason why it's 75% alcohol is to make sure that it's killing viruses, in particular, the COVID-19 virus right now. So that's really what it's designed to do. That's the reason why the FDA fast-tracked this and made it available for manufacturers of all walks of the industry to be able to make it. So it's important for us to be able to make it right now, and it's important for us to be able to supply to our spa accounts, because they're heading back to work some of them in the next week or two. So it's really a safety product and not necessarily something that we plan on having available for wholesale. I hope that makes sense.
I think that's great. We do have a couple of just quick questions on the formulation. I don't want to spend too much time here, but again, because we're following the World Health Organization formulation that was fast-tracked, it does have 75% isopropyl alcohol. Would you say that the overall formulation is drying, or would you say that it still has good benefits of killing any bacteria, but also isn't going to really, really dry the hands out?
I mean, there's no doubt about it. It's going to dry the hands out. 75% alcohol, it's a lot. So the formulation, anybody can go to the FDA and look this up. It's right on the FDA's website. It's 75% if you're using isopropyl. It's 80% if you're using ethanol. And they fast-tracked the drug application. We got it in 2 days. So, and I've heard of people that have got it in the same day. So it's not a great formula. It's 4 ingredients. It's isopropyl alcohol, water, because you need water as the carrier, because if it's pure alcohol, it evaporates too quickly and doesn't give enough time to kill microbes, the fungus, mold, bacteria, and most importantly, virus. It's hydrogen peroxide, and the hydrogen peroxide is designed to kill any microbes inside the package that might be existing, because they don't want the alcohol working to kill any microbes inside the package, and a little bit of glycerol, which is glycerin, for conditioning. But I can tell you, it's not a great skin conditioning formula. I mean, clearly we have other products that will help with what it's doing to the hands, but the companies that normally manufacture hand sanitizer, they are going to continue to file for other applications for this. When you file for a drug application, it usually takes around a minimum. The fastest I've seen it is about 2 months, but it usually takes about 3 months in order for it to go through. So I think there's going to be some innovation around how hand sanitizers in general are made and how we create new hand safety products. But for the time being, this is something that we were able to make. It got fast-tracked, and we're going to continue to make it for as long as we need to. And it's something that I think that the spas will be able to utilize for not just hands, but also, to spray on surfaces. I mean, it's a great product. It's something that I've found incredibly useful, and just going about day-to-day daily life, it's something that I think people are going to want to have access to. And in a sprayer, it comes out relatively quickly.
Okay, perfect. I think that answers everyone's questions on hand sanitizer.
Wonderful. Okay, so I don't know that, I'll just cover this real quickly, the dropship program, because I know a lot of people have taken advantage of this. And I know we still get a lot of questions about this from existing customers that have not been made aware, but obviously for all the spas that are still closed, but maybe opening slowly, and maybe even when they're open, some guests may not be ready to venture out. Some guests may not be ready to walk through the doors. Everybody wants to be able to open up, but we all want to be able to open up safely, but not everybody's going to be comfortable going into the spa as of yet. So we're going to wait and see for a little while. But we have the dropship program available, which means that we can ship the retail product directly to your customer. We're charging you the regular wholesale price. We're charging our spa partners your regular wholesale price. You're charging your guest, your client, your retail price. Right? We're just passing the shipping cost directly onto them. So you'll charge them the shipping, we charge you the shipping, and we ship the product directly to them. So you don't have to stock the product, you don't have to stock the inventory, but with that, we're also continuing to include the complimentary staycation facial. We're helping to keep that skin of theirs in the best possible condition until it is that they can get back to see you. And depending on where you are in the country, you know, they're going to open up a little bit faster. Some parts of the country are going to open up faster than others. Some are going to, you know, have to social distance and stay in place a little bit longer. So I've gotten the question, how long are we going to continue to do this? And the answer is we'll do it as long as we have to. As long as we have to continue to help our spa partners, we're going to do this. So ordered more supplies to make it available. Even if it's a single retail product, they're going to get this complimentary staycation facial. And we've gotten so much positive feedback, you know, a lot of visibility on social media, and that's what we want to be able to do. We want to be able to help our spa partners the best way that we can, you know, to stay open and stay viable. It's really helped a lot of our spa partners when it comes to revenue, and anything that we can do to help, we want to be able to help.
And for those of you who aren't familiar with the staycation and the dropship program, we have laid out some amazing marketing assets, things that you can post directly on your social videos, reviewing the protocol. We've really tried to make it as easy as possible for you to reach out to your customers and to be able to offer them this dropship program. So again, if you aren't familiar with this program, or if you're looking to get your hands on some of these different assets that we created, please email us at info@circadia.com, and we're more than happy to send those out to you.
Okay, Caitlin, I think we've got a little bit of time to field some questions, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up for the day.
Sure. So we've gone through most of the questions. The most frequently asked question is, when are we going to be able to share the slides and also to share the presentation? So we have done this Wednesday webinar series. I think we're on week 5. And all of them have been recorded, and they're all living on our circadia.com/replay. And I typed it into chat multiple times. You can reach out to any of your business development managers here at Circadia, and they can send you the link. But you can go back and view any other webinar Michael's done since we've all been in this kind of stay-at-home order. And then we'll have this one living there as well. We'll also have the slides out to everybody. So if you were interested in getting the slide deck, we'll be emailing that out to everybody through the email address that you use to register for the webinar. Another question that we got is, Michael, next time you do a webinar, people would love to see your smiling face. So we'll definitely take that into consideration for the next webinar. But everyone is loving the information. If you have any other additional questions that maybe we didn't get to or that comes up in the replay, again, feel free to email.
Well, I'll have to work on trimming my quarantine beard before they can see my smiley face. Well, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. We truly appreciate it, and thank you all for following along with the educational series. It's been great to see the responses and to have people wanting to tune in and to suggest certain topics. And we've got some really exciting things coming up. So we just want everyone to continue to stick with us, stay positive, stay happy, stay healthy. Everyone be well, and we will see you on next week's Wednesday webinar. Thank you all so much for tuning in, and we'll see you again next time.